want now to bring forth our featured speaker. Edwin Remsberg attended the University of Maryland, College Park, where he studied photojournalism. He received recognition for his work in 1987 when his photograph of the Amtrak crash in Chase, Maryland was selected by Life magazine as one of their pictures of the year, and later pictures of the decade. After graduating in 1989, Remsberg began his career in photography working for the Baltimore Sun. He has since continued his work as a freelance photographer. He has participated in projects such as Maryland Traditions with the Maryland State Arts Council and Maryland's Best with Maryland's Department of Agriculture. Remsberg has had several bodies of work published, including the illustrations of Baltimore sculpture in Cindy Kelly's book titled Outdoor Sculpture in Baltimore, a historical guide to public art in the monumental city, and of Maryland foods in Lucy Snodgrass's cookbook entitled Dishing Up Maryland. He quotes, "There is something about our places, our people, and our time that is special. By isolating it and celebrating it, it gives one the ability to appreciate. If I can make images that cause people to see their world and themselves in a new way, then I have done my job." Ladies and gentlemen, Edwin Remsberg.
I'm Will Hales with Hales Farms here in Salisbury, Maryland, and we grow approximately 300 acres of watermelons. My father started growing seedless watermelons approximately 28 years ago, and I guess I'm third generation in the family farm to grow watermelons. As far as watermelons grown here in Maryland and Delaware and on the Eastern Shore, we feel very strongly that we have the best flavor and the best quality. I think it's a lot better when your produce or whatever it is grown kind of basically in your backyard, because you know, at least you have a relationship. Possibly you might even be in the community with people who know the growers of the produce, and maybe you ride by and see the fields and see the guys working hard out there to try to raise the best produce. So we'll start doing our rye strips in November. In March we'll start tilling the land with a rototiller. We'll lay our plastic. And then shortly after that, after we get all the water hooked up before we plant, we usually try to have the irrigation all ready to roll before we plant our field. And then we'll plant the field most of the time around the tail end of April. And then after that, basically every week we'll plant a field, and we try to keep our crop spread out. And we'll usually plant almost every week up until the first part of July. Typically, we'll have anywhere on any given day from 40 to 60 guys working for us, harvesting and packing the melons. If you've been driving down the road recently and you've seen a chopped up school bus, that's pretty much the harvesting vehicle of choice. Yeah, you'll see a lot of school buses, and the guys will come out in the field and drive down the drive roads, and they'll be loading them up. And we eat quite a bit of watermelon, probably a little bit different than most people. The way we usually eat it is to get a piece out in the field. So we cheat a little bit, but most of the time if we're out here, whether it's checking the irrigation lines or we might be out here spraying or just coming out seeing what's going on with the bees and the pollination or whatever, and we'll come out here, and if we see one that looks like we need to eat it, we'll go ahead and slice it open. And most of the time we eat the heart out of it because we're around them so much, and then we'll enjoy that, and then we'll roll it over. I guess the most gratifying thing about growing watermelons probably to me would be when you see small children enjoying a watermelon with their family, whether it be a picnic or any type of outdoor activity. There's something about kids and watermelon, and just kind of seeing the young child eating the watermelon with the juice running all down their face onto their T-shirt. That's pretty gratifying, because most kids are pretty attracted to watermelon and love the way it tastes. So that would pretty much be the most gratifying thing. And of course, it's gratifying to see a well-raised crop. And if you don't have Marilyns watermelons in your local grocery store, please ask the produce buyer or the produce manager in the store if he would do what he could to get you some Marilyns watermelons. And after that happens, I think you'll continue asking for them and returning to purchase them. And that'd be a great help to us, so thanks.
So many of you probably know Will. He's right around the corner here. And I started with that video because it's something we do a lot of. We've done I think 380 video clips like that so far on YouTube. And of all of them, that one of Will has had more than 4 million viewers. It is our most popular video we've ever done, which I think is probably because it's from the lower shore. And for those of you who live down here, you may not realize it, but Will has an accent, which I can hear, and I think it's wonderful. And I think that accent is as much of the sense of place as any of the pictures of the landscape there here. So he really, for me, it's those sort of profiles of people and the way people talk and the stories they have to share that really tells about not just where they're from, but what makes the place they're from special. And so Will's a good example. The number 2 video in terms of being watched is on Smith Island cakes. So as you can see, I've done very well by coming to the lower shore. It's been good to me. I started out in agriculture, growing up on a farm, and I showed pigs in 4-H and started out believing I was going to be a farmer. And somewhere along the way, I decided taking pictures was easier. And in our house where I grew up, my grandfather had kept diaries his whole life, every day from 1916 to about 1982 when he died. And I had access to all those diaries. And I started, after I picked up a camera, I started going around the farm and taking pictures of the farm and sort of trying to document his life that he had recorded in the diaries with my images of the place. And that's really how I got started in photography, by sort of capturing the stories and the history. Yeah, and I'm a big believer, we don't throw anything out in our family. And I'm a very big believer that objects contain stories, that within objects and places and things, there are sort of hidden in them, there's a spirit of story within them that you get from having those objects around. There was just a piece on the difficulties of minimalism in the New York Times this week. And I'm constantly having people come up to me who've seen my family background and say, well, it's amazing that you have so much history. You have so many ancestors and so much family history. And I point out that we all basically have the same number of ancestors. It's just, some of us have kept our stuff and some of us have thrown it out, we have deaccessioned. And keeping all that stuff, all that junk, the old rusty tools, we keep those stories somewhere in the rust, I think, very much. And what I do is use a camera to try to find the stories and things like that in people. So that's really how I started, was on the farm taking pictures in different seasons and stuff. And this is my other side of the family's grandparents' farm as well. So I took that background of farming and really made photographing agriculture primarily what I started doing. Yeah, so we start from the agriculture, and it makes sense that you go from agriculture to culture, like sort of following the whole process through to the food part. And that's kind of what I've done. I'm a big believer. I like to say, I tell this people a lot, that if you have deep roots, you can have long branches. You're like a tree. These are my sheep. Actually, I raised on my farm. And I went from the farm to expanding out into the larger culture around the community and so forth. So when I was at the Baltimore Sun, early in my career, I would go around to different cultural events and do different stories. I was really fascinated by the stories that we tell. And I have a bit of a background in it. A lot of members of my family had done this. This was in 1898. My great-great-aunt Martha Watson got a camera, and for 2 years she was a very intense photographer. And this is a photograph she took of railroad workers down on the railroad tracks down below our house. And what I love about it is the ordinariness of it. It's not a birthday. It's not a holiday. It's not Christmas. It is just a very ordinary daily life thing. So I started doing that myself. This is for my first book, Marilyns Vanishing Lives, to try to go around the state and sort of document and capture things that were vanishing around the state, ways of working and the ways people lived around the state of Maryland. And at that time, coming out of the newspaper world, and I really saw my job as showing other people what goes on, to educate and so forth. And we did this book, and then we had a big exhibition after the book was finished at the Baltimore Museum of Industry in Baltimore. And at that exhibition, this guy, Mr. Overman, came to the exhibit, and I don't know if you can see in the picture, but his glasses are about as thick as they could be. In fact, he would work, this was near Johns Hopkins Hospital. He, in this back alley, he made brooms, and he would work in almost complete darkness because he really couldn't see anything. And just these these Widowmaker machines flying back and forth all over the place in the dark while he's running around making brooms. It was kind of amazing. But what was really cool, when we had the exhibit, and this picture was on the wall, and he and his wife came up, led him up there, and his wife held onto his arm and looked at the picture and pointed the picture to him, and she said, "Howard, I'm so proud of you." And for the first time, I saw that I didn't really necessarily need to educate all of you and all the rest of the world about what he did. I needed to educate people like Howard about how cool it is that they do what they do. And that really, instead of holding up a magnifying glass, I had more to do by holding up a mirror for people. And that has really guided me in a lot of what I do. It's not necessarily for the rest of the world to see what other people do. That's a nice byproduct. But what I'm proudest of is when I can show people how cool they really are in other people's eyes. And that's really been driving me. So that's kind of what we do everywhere. This is when my assistant, Katie, in Swaziland. So wherever we go, we try to give back more than we take. That's really been a sort of guiding principle on how we go around and take pictures, is to always try to give back more than we take from people. And you have fun. So you celebrate what people love about themselves. And it really, when you do things for the right reasons and feel good about what you do, you can go so far. It's really wonderful. This is from the sculpture book, and it really, I want to put this in there to point out that context matters. Context is one of the reasons I love to photograph sculpture. I've done 2 books on sculpture. Is that sculpture is really made what it is by the context that it appears in. Okay? Sculpture is alive based on what's going on around it. So context for everything matters, not just for sculpture, but for people and places. It all has to go together. It all has to relate. Here in Maryland, we start out with the Calverts, and I'm a lifelong Marylander, and many generations of my family have been in the state, so I'm very, very attached, and it's really what I love. This is Lord Baltimore's home in England, and we actually, I'll make my plug here. We run a workshop there in the summer, and you're all invited. Come with me to the Lord Baltimore's house, because we do a photography workshop there every summer in July 8th to 15th. Come join us. Talk to Lena. But what's really cool is this is really where Maryland starts. Maryland starts here in northern England in Lord Baltimore's house when Lord Baltimore was given the grant from Maryland. And he loads up his boats and comes on over, and he doesn't just send people over. They bring with them a lot of culture and a lot of things from England that have influenced us now. So being able to sort of trace back and connect the two has been really, really fun. Another shop in England, leaving the shores. And actually, my last ancestor to leave England left in the late 1700s, and I still go visit my cousins over in England when we go over. So we've kept that connection. But yeah, they sailed on over, and what becomes Maryland now comes from England back there. And they bring with them these English traditions and these English ways of doing things. But we are definitely not English anymore. We've gone beyond it. We've taken, old ways, new ways, and mixed them together and so forth. From beaten biscuits to stuffed ham. And our location, our geography really affects us. Whether you're at the bottom of the bay or the top of the bay, it's where we are affects what we do. And I will warn you that on average we do about 250,000 pictures a year, I think, last year. There's a lot of pictures here. I'm going to just run through very, very quickly. But this place, this sense of place is very important to me, and it's something I think everyone needs. Because we are informed by where we come from. Our roots make our branches possible. And this idea that you need identity is very important. And it's very, very key right now. I think right now there's, with this the move against globalization, really points up how much people need an identity to hold on to and how universal it is. This is King Mswati III of Swaziland, who is the last absolute monarch in Africa. And he likes me, which is good. Mswati's a bit of a pig. He's kind of a, what's a terrible thing to say, but he drives a Rolls Royce. He goes to Las Vegas. He's in one of the poorest countries in Africa, with the highest AIDS rate in the world, 25% rate of AIDS in Swaziland. And every year he does a thing called the Umhlanga reed dance, where he brings in this case about 100,000 childless, unmarried women into a stadium, and he picks a new wife that he has, another wife. So we went there, this is 2015, to photograph this and so forth, and I was fully expecting there to be a lot of discontent within that community, because he doesn't sound like the most generous, enlightened, and progressive person in the world. Instead, what we found is that Mswati's a rock star. They love Mswati. And they all acknowledge that a lot of the things in the way Mswati rules are sort of nasty and not desirable, but they're nasty. It's their own culture, and the sense that they're more proud of the fact that they have their own unique culture than they are of the individual problems with it really struck me. I was really surprised at how much pride there was in being Swazi, in having a unique culture, and being different from the rest of the world, and being their own selves. And I think we see that in our own country now to some extent. That it's more important, that identity is more important than fairness or rightness. It's the sense of being someone, knowing who you are, and the search for yourself and your identity and your place in the world. And like I said, I do a lot of work in England, and I saw that with the Brexit thing. The Brexit thing, made no sense to a lot of people, but we're not just seeing things happening in our own country. This is a universal thing that happens in every culture in every country. The idea that you want to have your own identity and know who you are and where you came from. This is like I say, it's very universal. This is at the reed dance. All the maidens bring reeds to give to the Queen Mother. But I took this picture not 24 hours after I took this picture, which is the horse guards at Buckingham Palace, bringing the equines to the Queen Mother. So it's all very universal. I'm constantly struck by that there's as much as we might think different things are unique, they really often fit into patterns that repeat in every culture. This is jaggery making in Punjab, India, which is a sugar cane boiled down to make sugar cakes. It's almost identical to maple syrup making in western Maryland, Leo Shindle, Allegheny County. Or in Maine. This is about maple syrup boiling in Maine. Here's the tombs of the kings here near Memphis in Egypt. If you haven't been to Cairo, it's wonderful. The tomb of the king in Memphis. Those were taken about a week apart. So, Portland, Oregon, the coast of Portland, Oregon, and the coast of Portland, Maine. There's a lot of universal truths. This is the Roman Forum in Rome, and the Marina District in Dubai right now. It's sort of our gleaming, shining cities. The patterns repeat both over time and space in so many ways. So I'm constantly, with all this sort of these repeating patterns, we look for difference because sameness is sort of accepted. I spent a lot of time just photographing places. Jacksonville, Florida, again back in England. Baltimore. This is my truck in Africa. Alaska, I work with the University of Alaska. It's one of my big clients that we do a lot of work with. To Kansas City and New Delhi. And there's this thing, a lot of what we do in photography especially is romanticize places. This is Whitby Abbey in England. It's where Dracula takes place. Dracula kills Lucy right behind the abbey in the novel. But we make these very romantic places. But the reality is most places are just full of people and kind of not that pleasant. This is the Taj Mahal the Taj Mahal is a great place to see people. It's a terrible place to see Islamic architecture. And so I've really been fascinated by crowds and people and how people interact with these spaces and so forth. This is the in Rome again. And right this year in particular, I've been photographing a lot of markets. A lot of public markets have become fascinating for me, and the way people interact with each other and with the things that matter to them and are important to them within the public market. This is the Mutra Souk in Oman, at the Persian Gulf. Oman's one of my favorite countries in the world. This is the Mercado in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which is the largest market in Africa. It just goes on for miles and miles. And the Khan in Cairo. And this is Jaipur, India. So I love this idea of universal patterns being seen in every place, but also the sense of that at the same time you see these differences. Or Temple Bar in Dublin. Or Cecil County, Maryland. A different kind of bar. This is the Lori Festival in Punjab at a private house. And a very small picnic this is Oman, the Mussadam Peninsula in the Persian Gulf. And of course the Forbidden City in China, lots and lots of people, 80,000 people a day come through these gates. China's a lot of fun and very interesting. We sort of, again, we go back, we tend to romanticize and isolate places, but I think the context is really neat. In working with Maryland traditions, we work with a lot of people who come from other cultures of the world and bring their culture with them. And it's very interesting that the culture they bring is also very pure and pared down. So this is a Chinese calligrapher in Montgomery County, Maryland, who had, this very clean, pure sense of Chinese design and culture. In Beijing, it's very messy and electric and modern. So you can always, sometimes I'm very fascinated, but sometimes you find the more pure incarnation in the diaspora than you do in the place where it came from. And I love this picture. This is from the night market in Beijing, which is a great place. But I want you to notice the T-shirt in the background. I love cultural appropriation. I think cultural appropriation is a great thing. And I know lots of people talk terrible things about it. But what I love about it is you see it in every culture. You see everyone appropriating from everyone else everywhere. It is not a one-way street, or there's no particular one. It is not always like some terrible dominant culture preying upon those poor cultures. It happens everywhere. It happens in every culture universally. She's eating, I think, an octopus, and I think he's got scorpion back there. And it's the best street food on the planet is in Beijing. If you go to the Beijing night market, there's this whole district where these little shops. If you ever watch Blade Runner, it is Blade Runner come to life. So even within Maryland, we can look at some cultural appropriation in the sense that Maryland. We think of Old Bay as being very Maryland, but Old Bay is the product of a German immigrant, a Jewish German immigrant around World War II. It is not an ancient thing that sprung fully formed out of the soil of the Chesapeake Bay. It is Eastern European sausage spice, and what makes it our culture doesn't have to be pure or stay pure. This is the spice market in Delhi, India, with the largest spice market in the world. Korbori Road, I believe is pronounced. And I think spice is a good analogy because if you all these are wonderful spices, but you don't want a great big pure spoonful of any of them. But you mix them together and put them with other things, and you get something that's delicious and wonderful. And I think culture is the same way. If you work so hard to keep your culture pure, I'm not sure that it ever grows, but when you start mixing things together, you get something wonderful and amazing. But just like a spice, you want to know where you want to be able to taste individually where it came from. You don't want to lose all the flavor, but you don't want to isolate it so much that you lose the banquet. So I like mixing things up. These are Tibetans with cell phones. This is the Ngoni, the traditional West African Ngoni, which becomes the banjo when it comes to Baltimore. And I think, Native American culture is very fascinating to me because, what we think of as Native American culture doesn't have to be frozen in time in 1491. It continues to grow and become alive and change as time progresses. And so I like appropriation, and I like when people enjoy culture and share it. No matter what it is, we need some sort of identity. These are Amish in Western Maryland. And then I'll show you different Maryland things. So a lot of it's, I photograph the people and what they do, and in the people I hope you can see, and when we record here, the stories of who they are and where they came from and what they bring with them. I try to include some local heroes. Bill Kirkson, who he's the song Hot Rod Lincoln, he plays the guitar on. Lefty Cray, who's the god of fly fishing. Some of these, but there's just to give you a sense of people and culture that I love to photograph. And many of these are from the Maryland Traditions program. So, and others are from a lot of the work I do with farmers and agriculture, which is number 2 on our YouTube list. And all sorts of hunters, gatherers, and the royalty associated with them. But yeah, place matters. I should probably wrap up with place. And this was Turrialba volcano in Colombia before. This is the Sossusvlei in Namibia. So we were just in Namibia last month. Alaska, again, where I do a lot of work. And Africa. I try to get to Africa as much as possible because I adore. This is Victoria Falls. In Patagonia, in Chile. So the place matters. This is the Palouse in eastern Washington State. One of my favorite places to take pictures of, actually. The Palouse. In South Africa. The Middle East, this is the Persian Gulf in Oman. The place matters. This is how I travel for a lot of places. Either rent or buy a truck, or just go in and buy a tent and head out. So I get to go see a lot of the world and do a lot of things, and I enjoy it quite a bit. So let me show you what I'm doing the rest of the world, since I showed you a lot of Maryland. This is some of the African work we do. A lot of the work I do in Africa revolves around development. In particular, this is the Ethiopia project I'm working on with fertilizer. Mopani worms, which are like insect-flavored Cheetos. They crunch beautifully. But that's in Botswana. Botswana's done a wonderful job of doing cultural heritage villages, where they've sort of found a way to monetize traditional culture in a way that keeps it sustainable and keeps villages sustainable that might not be otherwise, using culture and history as an economic vehicle. This is Lesotho, the highest country in the world. And right now, what I have working on next, if you're going to follow what's going on now, I'm doing a lot of work with coffee at the moment. So this is Costa Rica, the coffee harvest. I'm working on sort of an extended project on the culture of coffee and how coffee is produced around the world. Ethiopia. And my private project that I'm working on is I'm secretly obsessed with camels. I love camels. So I will end with a few camel pictures to send you on your journey. Because the camel is the only animal that you can do everything with. You can eat a camel, you can ride a camel, you can milk a camel, you can race a camel, you can pull a cart with a camel. Everything an animal can do, as it's often said, the camel is a horse designed by committee. It can do everything you want done. This is the largest camel market in the world in UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, right? Where Saudi Arabia and UAE and Oman meet. So, whoops, in Egypt, camels. So yeah, camels are. I just think camels are fascinating. So with that, I will end with a push. And thank you all.